Good morning. It is nice to see you again. This morning I'm going to be presenting two professional development modules on different instructional design processes. So the first module we're going to be looking at this morning is the Addy instructional design model. And this is one of the concepts of instructional design. In fact, one of the largest concepts to get you going into instructional design. So let's take a look at our instructional objectives. So the first instructional objective will be how are these models used in the instructional design process? I want you to be able to understand and have an overview of the Addy instructional design model. We will look and analyze the 5 steps to the Addy process for instructional design. And a takeaway would be that you'll be able to take this step-by-step Addy process and plan and create your own professional development training modules back at your school. All right, so let's go ahead and start with just an overview of instructional design and instructional design models. And why do we have these models? Well, these models provide a framework, which is very important in which to work. This framework is a way that you can represent to your stakeholders how the process is going to work for them in a very consistent and systematic fashion. Instructional design models, they're used with a purpose, and why we're using them in our school system is because we want to improve teaching and learning. I already said that it's systematic, it's cyclical in nature, and the process itself analyzes the needs of the learner, establishes objectives, targets outcomes, and develops content and materials to meet the learner's need. The process evaluates the results and then makes these needed changes for improvement. So if we look at the overview of the Addy model, and I think why I've decided to present the Addy model because it really is kind of the umbrella model when we look at instructional design, and it's considered a broad umbrella, which a lot of the other instructional design processes were framed from. In a study by Bond and Durkin in 2020, so a very new study, of 297 instructional designers, 41.3% of them use the Addy model. So there are other instructional design models that are used, but the Addy model was used by the majority of the participants. And although this is considered a generic model for some, the Addy model has risen in use among instructional designers and instructional design teams. And the reason why, because of its flexibility and the simplicity of the 5-step process in the Addy model. It's been targeted as a standard method for instructional designers. So that's the reason why I chose this as one of our important concepts to teach during this first module. So let's go ahead and take a look at the 5 key design cycle stages. So we have analysis, we have design, development, implementation, and evaluation. Notice the cyclical nature of this model. What I want you to take a look at is that during this cyclical design process, you can see the arrows pointing back to evaluation. So I don't want you to think of evaluation being the final step, as you can see in this step 5. Certainly with this design model, we can go back to evaluating at any point within the phase and plan for revision. So at each step, the process can be evaluated and reevaluated to improve the process. I want to read you this quote. Instructional design activities typically are not completed in a linear step-by-step manner, although they may be portrayed that way for initial understanding and convenience. So I want you to remember that evaluation step can be implemented at any stage of the process. We're going to go ahead and look specifically at the analyze. Analyze is this first step, analyzing the situation as an instructional designer, looking at the environment and looking at the needs of the learner. It's important to ask yourself a question. Who are your learners? What kind of skills and knowledge do they need to understand? And then then you get an idea of understanding the learning materials that are required, and in turn, understanding the goals and objectives for the learner. This analysis phase is incredibly important to gain that foundation of understanding. In the design phase, right here, we design the learning objectives, knowing from the information from the analysis. You can ask yourself this question: what is the purpose of instruction? And then identify the learning objectives from the information you gathered in that analyzing phase. What skills do the learners need to possess? What knowledge do your learners need to know? What are the learning outcomes that will make your learners successful? Questioning yourself all along the phase, and it's possible that you may need to go back to another phase, evaluating, constantly evaluating. In the development phase is we look at these identified objectives from the design phase and how can they be met? What knowledge, skills, or attitudes must be taught? And then from that knowledge, you need to develop effective instructional strategies, and certainly this comes from evidence-based research, and activities to support and meet the learning objectives. Once we've done that, we can go to the implementation phase. These phases before are very important because when we have this implementation, we're implementing those instructional strategies and the activities developed, managing the conduction of those activities or the course, obviously ensuring an effective and conducive learning environment. And this is the time to try out the training program with the learners. Once again, it may be that as you're going along with the implementation phase, you may find out that there needs to be additional design or development, constantly evaluating. And then in our final phase right here, the evaluating the success and the impact of the training, measuring the success, noting what needs to be changed and change it to improve. And remembering this to evaluate return on investment. Was it worth it? Was it worth the time? Was it worth the money? I just wanted to stick this in. We've already gone over this slide of important questions to ask, but we're talking about return on investment. Was the overall was it worth it? Should it be continued? Was it implemented properly? Did we get the intended outcomes? Was it cost effective? So I'm not going to go over this again, but I just want to make sure that you know those questions to ask. Now, you can stay with me for the second module, or you can come back at another time, but I'm going to go on to our module 2. If we look at module 2, and this is our professional development module 2, I'm taking another concept of instructional design. This concept being the SAM instructional design model. I chose 2 models, and I chose the models because of the simplicity of both. We know that our time is important. We know we do not have a lot of time, but we have a lot of things that we need to achieve. So if we look at these instructional objectives, they're the same. I want you to be able to understand why instructional design models are used, understanding an overview of the SAM instructional design model, analyzing the steps in the instructional design model, and making sure that we have this takeaway. We want to be able to apply the SAM instructional design process in professional development in our school. So let's go ahead and talk about the SAM. If we look, and I already went over this slide for those of you who did not attend Module 1, but we know that what we're looking at is we're trying to provide a framework in which we can work, a framework that is consistent and systematic, and one where we can represent our work to others. And certainly the SAM model, as with the Addy model, is used with the purpose of improving teaching and learning. So if we look at this model, we're going to see in the SAM model 3 different phases. And I'll talk about each of these phases in detail, but we have the preparation phase, background, we have the iterative design phase and the iterative development phase. This looks a little bit different than the Addy model. We're going to talk about the cyclical nature in each of these phases. So SAM stands for Successive Approximation Model, and it's an alternative to the Addy model. An important concept in the SAM model is that e-learning courses can be completed in these little iterative chunks to make them manageable, especially manageable in the design process. The chunks are small steps which allow for improvement and adjustment at each step for quality improvement. Although the Addy model allows for evaluation along the way, the main tenet of this SAM model is to break down the process so the process is cyclical and improvement can easily be made along the way. This is ideal for small e-learning projects or courses, and many of which what we do for education as an instructional designer. Let's take a look at the three phases. So we can see here, I'm going to first talk about the background phase, but the SAM model is meant to increase flexibility, adaptability, and responsiveness, and it's an opportunity to collaborate with stakeholders along the process. So if we look at the preparation phase, it's an information gathering phase, knowing the background and knowledge of our learners, knowing the needs of our learners, and talking about the possible solutions. This is a time to have an agreement between the learner's needs and the learning solution. That's the preparation phase. So let's go on. If we take a look at this, this is the background phase, information gathering preparation phase. The next phase is this iterative design phase. I want you to notice the cyclical nature of this phase, of this design phase. It's the time where we design the course material and the content. We have this initial prototype and of designing the course, but the difference here is there is a rotation between the prototype, the review, the design, and going back to improve that prototype. So you can see this cyclical nature. You design a small portion and you make sure you review it, look at the design, make changes if needed. So there's a stress on this iterative process to develop a course that meets the needs and objectives. It's very important. So we don't spend more money and more time at the implementation and the rollout. If we look here at the iterative development phase right here, there's this same cyclical process that goes on. We take this design, we implement the design, we evaluate the design, we develop and make changes, implement again, and continue. The first implementation is called, we go from that beta phase to the alpha phase to the golden version of development. At any time during the cyclical nature, this implementation can be changed because the rollout doesn't come to the end. We don't roll this course out to our learners until we implement the prototype, make sure it's what we want through evaluation, and make any changes. Change can happen at any time. We can avoid increased cost and the increase in time. So I'm going to go ahead and end that module. We have a list of references that I think will be very helpful for you. So in sum, our first module was module 1, was the Addy instructional design process, and module 2 was the SAM instructional design process. I look forward to seeing you again at our next professional development.